Amen. We've seen the structure of Matthew, Mark and Luke, and when you go to verse 29, which is the sun, moon and stars, then the heavens shall be shaken in verse 29, we can see that you can go to the parallel passages in Mark and Luke, and in Mark 24 and 25 it has the same information: sun, moon and stars, the powers of heaven. If you went to Mark, I'm not sure why, but in 24 it says the sun and the moon, and then it says the stars and the heavens. It breaks it down that way. Does anybody have any idea why Mark would break it down in that way? When I say Mark, obviously the people who produced the Bible broke down that passage. We don't believe that there were verse numbers when the story was first written. And if you can see that, '29, it's all in one verse. Mark, there's two verses that it does it in, and the sun and the moon is in 24, and the stars and the powers of heaven are in 25. Can you all see that? So why would they split it that way? Okay,
I think this also to show us, because if you go to Matthew chapter 24, you see that it's like they are happening at the same time. But you come to Luke, giving us Mark is giving us a different thing, showing us that it is not at the same time that the sun and moon are being darkened, that the stars are also falling, and you can also see this how they happen. That's what I think.
Okay. Okay, someone else. No thoughts?
Repeat.
You'd repeat what he said? Oh, you want to repeat my question? I didn't catch what you said, sorry.
Your question.
Repeat my question. In Luke 29, it just has that information, 4 pieces of information: sun, moon, stars, heaven. In Mark 24 says sun and moon, 25 says stars and heaven. It splits it into 2 verses. So I'm asking, why do you think they did that? No?
What I would feel is because the moon receives its light from the sun. And if the sun doesn't give light, then the moon won't have light. And then the stars also receive light from the stars and from the sun. So the stars need light such that when they are falling you can see them. But if there is no light, and when they are falling, you won't recognize that they are falling. That's why in verse 24, if the sun not give the light, then the moon will be darkened. That's my argument.
And he split it up. If we see when they happen, in verse 24 it says, but in those days, after that tribulation, the sun shall be darkened and the moon shall not give her light. You know those things happened in 1780, verse 2. But then in verse 25 it says, and the stars of heaven shall fall, and the powers that are in heaven shall be shaken. Now in 1833, the stars fell. So it kind of easy for us to see that these are 2 separate events that happened in different time, different years. For the sun and the moon happened in 1780.
So when they made these verses, they knew all that information?
No.
Because this is way before that event, isn't it?
Yes.
Anyone else?
I cannot exactly give the reason, but what I'm saying here, how they display these verses into two, I think the common sense that they use that when the sun is darkened, the moon is not going to give a light. So what they know that this event, the falling of the stars and the darkening of the moon, are going to be separate events.
So that again, the last bit.
I'm saying, if the sun is going to be darkened, they know that the moon is not going to give a light, and that is one event. But they know that the falling of stars is different from these two. So that I think that could be the reason to separate these two verses.
Okay. No, we haven't discussed this, but I guess it's so obvious. When it says the stars are going to fall, what is actually falling? Are they stars? The meteorites, yeah? We haven't really mentioned that. I assumed it was all obvious to us. We know that. They're not real stars. So I like that answer that my brother gave, that a couple of people gave that. When the sun goes darkened, the moon cannot give her light. So that seems to be tied together. Then the separate event is that the stars of heaven shall fall. And why would the stars of heaven fall? Because the powers of heaven is going to be shaken, and the shaking of that heaven would cause these stars to fall. So I think you can see some kind of connection there. We could go to a parallel passage that discusses this. Where would that be? Where would the parallel passage be to this? Where Matthew, Mark, Luke, there's a parallel passage. No, we've got if we put all the three together, where else can we find this information? So let's have a quick look at Revelation 6. Now, Revelation 6 is going to talk about a fig tree, but it's not the same fig tree, or maybe it is the same fig tree, as in Matthew. So, as you're turning to Revelation 6, I'm just going to read Matthew 24:32. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender, and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh. So all that's saying is, when the branch is tender, we haven't actually spoken about what that means, but it's going to bring forth leaves, then you know that summer is near. So that's kind of all it really says. And if we go to Revelation 6, verse 12, then I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. So when we talk about the blood moon, it's not actually given in the Gospels, it's from Revelation, we picked that up. All it just says is in the Gospels, the moon's going to go dark. So the extra piece of information, the darkness or the blood, is given in Revelation, not the Gospels. And the stars of heaven fell upon the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. While we're in Revelation 6:13, what is an untimely fig? My brother? What is an untimely fig?
Untimely figs, may I understand this to be figs that are not ready. The time for its ripening is not yet. Then when it's shaken by a mighty wind.
So an untimely fig is an unripe fig. How do you understand untimely fig?
The same way, unripe fig.
Unripe fig.
I think they are green figs, they are mature.
You think they're mature figs,
Yeah.
so it's opposite to them.
Yeah.
They said unmature, you're saying they're mature figs.
Yeah.
Brother Wilson?
The Bible may right now reference those means green figs.
It says it's what figs? Green.
Green figs.
And what does that mean?
They're not mature.
They're not mature.
Premature.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think these are premature. They are not ripe yet.
Immature, premature. So why do you say that they're mature?
They say they're not mature.
Oh, you said that. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. You said that. Sorry.
I think that looking at the nature, a tree will shed the leaves when they are mature, so that the next season more new leaves will start springing up.
Say that again.
From nature,
Yeah.
according to my understanding, a tree will shed leaves when it's mature. So for next spring, more new leaves will spring up. So when a tree will shed the leaves, it is a sign that the trees are, it is sunny, a long dry period is coming. So when rain comes again, they start springing up. So I'm trying to compare it with nature. When it says green figs they are green, they can see they are mature.
So you're saying green means mature.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
It is premature.
They're mature.
No.
Immature.
Yeah.
Okay, we can get answer from that statement from verse 13. And the stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casted untimely figs. So there is untimely, which is premature, when she is shaken of a mighty wind. So there is a mighty wind. So meaning this fig tree, the fruits are not mature. So when there is that strong wind, it will make it to fall down.
But when it is mature, though there is no wind, they can fall.
So when they're mature, they'd fall by themselves.
Yeah.
But they're going to fall because of the wind.
Yeah.
This is a question. What is being spoken of here? Is it the leaf of it or the fruit of it?
The fruit.
The figs.
The fruit.
The fruit.
I don't know what fig is. But I don't know.
It's a fruit, like a plum, apple. It's just a type of fruit. My brother, what do you think?
Me,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the meaning of the word untimely. It means before usual time, before natural time, premature. I agree with you.
Which word are you looking at? Untimely.
Untimely, from Webster Dictionary.
Okay, so untimely means out of time.
Before time.
Before usual time, untimely because happening before natural time, premature, and untimely death.
So my question is, when you go to untimely, does that mean premature in the sense that the figs are not ready, or does it mean that they're going to be coming off the tree before they're supposed to? So I don't know if people. My brother's gone to the Greek. If you go to the Greek, what do you notice? Who said? Who spoke? Who spoke?
It says that when I check from the company, it says ripe fig.
which grows during the winter yet does not come to maturity but falls off in the spring.
Okay, so before you give us a definition of what the word means, and it's 3653. What do we notice about 3653? I presume you'll use King James, and I presume even in your digital ones that most of you seem to use, when a word is supplied, it's italicized. Yeah, is it italicized even on your devices?
Yeah.
Does everybody understand what I'm talking about? Do you understand what I'm talking about, my brother? Do you understand what I mean when I say words are italicized? Yeah? Okay, so everybody knows what I mean. So I presume they're italicized. So why does the King James Bible italicize words? Who's speaking? Why does it italicize words? When they're supplied by human wisdom. Everybody agree with that? Yeah. It's a straightforward answer. Like daily sacrifice, they added the word sacrifice. It's not there, it just means daily. So sometimes you might think when it says untimely figs, what would you expect those two English words to come from? When it said green figs or premature figs, would you expect that to be two words? You wouldn't? Sorry? Yeah, so I'm saying, would you expect it to be two words? Two Greek words? Yeah? Agree with that? I would. I'd expect one Greek word to say a fig as opposed to an orange, and another Greek word that would tell you premature or green. But if you go to the original, you'll find that it's not that case. That all of this in the Greek is one word, not two words. It's 3653. So if you've noticed this before, it shouldn't come as a surprise. But for some people, they're not aware of that when you translate into English, it's not a one-to-one equivalence from the Greek to the Hebrew. Sorry, Greek to English. So this word, 3653, isn't two Greek words. 3653 doesn't mean untimely. 3653 is a type of fig. Does that make sense? Yeah? Yeah, you're looking troubled. William is.
I'm not seeing that.
You're not seeing that?
Yeah, from the concordance.
Let me see your concordance. So your concordance has got, oh dear, it went funny. Okay. So you're using my sword, yeah? Is this my sword? Yeah. William? Is this my sword? Yeah? It says untimely figs, two English words. Untimely figs is two English words, and it's only got one Greek word, 3653. You can see it now? So, if you go back to what that word means, olunthos, of uncertain derivative, which means they don't know where it came from, and unripe, because it's out of season fig. So it actually means an unripe fig. I go to Thayer's, an unripe fig which grows during the winter, yet does not come to maturity but falls off in the spring. Everybody okay with that? So it's not a mature fig. So when you're searching 3653, you're not looking at the definition of untimely. What you're actually searching is what kind of fig it is. So it's this word that you're actually looking at, not this one. Does that make sense? Yeah? So you just need to watch out for that when you're trying to search for definitions. So, okay, so I've done enough about that one. Just wanted to make that point. That when they put Mark together, they split the information because they're seeing that when you shake a heaven, how would you shake the heavens? According to Revelation 6. Sister Joy? With a mighty wind. So heaven's being shaken with the wind, and hence the stars are going to fall, or the figs fall. Does that make sense? Yeah? Can you see how all these people would, when you go to 1848 and you get the angering of the nations or the shaking of the winds, can you see how they would bring these things together? It's not that difficult to think about it. It's not that wrong to think about it, because you can't get a wind in heaven, can you, in real life? We know that. So something must be shaking heaven, and it's these winds. And if you start putting the pieces of information together, we've already seen that in Loughborough's book, when they said Revelation 10, it should really have been Revelation 7. So we can see that. And in Revelation 7, what does it speak about? Not the ceiling bit. The winds. It talks about winds. So you've got winds in 7, you've got winds in Revelation 6. So I think it's logical to bring those thoughts together and say that the earth and the heaven are really the same thing. In fact, we've seen the same thing here, haven't we? We've made a connection with earth and heaven. When one gets shaken, the other one gets affected. I want us just to look at untimely figs in another way. It's not exactly the same thing. If you go to Isaiah 28, it's not going to talk about figs. Which verse are we going to? In Isaiah 28.
16.
Not 16. So if we turn to verse 4, it doesn't say untimely figs. And the glorious beauty which is on the head of the fat valley shall be as a fading flower, and the hasty fruit before the summer, which when he that looketh upon it when you shake your legs, it's making a clicking. And as the hasty fruit before the summer, which when he that looketh upon it seeth, while it is yet in his hand, he eateth it up. Okay? Can we see the similarity? I'm not saying it's parallel, I'm just saying the similarity. Maybe it is parallel or not. Brother Robert, can you explain that verse to us, please? Do you have to do the whole verse? There's a lot of information in the verse, but just the bit that we're looking at. What's it saying? First, just paraphrase, then we'll get someone else to give a historical understanding of what's going on. So Isaiah 28 verse 4.
So you want me to explain what it means?
I want you to paraphrase. So before you do it, let me explain what I think is a good way to approach when you do Bible study. So you read the verse, we've just read it, then you want to try and understand what the verse means. You've got a few options. Often the King James translation is not easy to grapple with. So you could go to a revised version if you wanted to. Everybody know what a revised version is? Yeah? Most people are scared to go to revised versions because they think, whatever you want to say, in fact they do. I'm not arguing that. They come from corrupt manuscripts, so people are very wary about using revised versions. But sometimes they actually make a verse a lot easier to understand. You can use it as a cross-reference. So that's a useful tool to use, but people don't like doing that. So what I think we should be doing is try to reword the verse in our own language so that we would understand what it says in plain language. So that's what I'm asking Brother Robert to do, to tell me that verse in his own language, in his own understanding, which means he's just doing a revised version. So I don't want him to explain anything, just to restate the verse in his own words. And then what you'd want to do is try and work out some of those symbols and see what they meant in the context of the passage, which then would mean you're going to take some of those symbols and try to understand them contextually. That would be the second step. Does that make sense? Okay, if it doesn't make sense, as we go through it, you'll see how we're going to do that. So all I'm asking Brother Robert to do is just paraphrase that verse in his own words. As he does that, listen carefully, because everybody should be agreeing with the way he reinterprets that. If you disagree, that means he's saying something wrong. He might choose a word that you don't like. You can give him that license. But if he interprets it properly, all of us, 25 of us, should all agree, yeah, that's what that verse says. Okay? So I'm not asking him to explain the symbols, to tell us what it meant, just to rephrase it with different words. And as I say, there's a lot of things there. All I'm really interested is the hasty fruit bit. So some of the other stuff you can, if you're not sure what the other stuff is, I don't mind you skipping over that. You can keep it in the original language, but as much as you can do would be useful.
Okay, so and the glorious beauty which is on the head of the fat valley. So I would expect that there is a plant which is the most beautiful in this valley. In this context, verse 1 told us it's Ephraim, shall be a fading flower, and as the hasty fruit before the sun. So hasty fruit means that it appears to be a fruit that can be eaten, although it is before summer, it is before the time that fruits are ready to be eaten. So it is something which is attractive to people to kind of take it and make it edible, but in the real sense but it is a hasty fruit because the time when fruits are ready to be eaten has not yet come. That's how I understand that word, hasty fruit before the summer. So it is untimely. Which when he looked upon its seal, when it is yet in his hand, he eateth it up. So when someone looks at this fruit, though it is before summer, yet it looks as if it's edible. It looks as if it is edible. So I think that is what that phrase, which when he that looketh upon its seal. So when you look at it, you see as if it's a fruit that can be edible. You know that it is before sun. When it is yet in his hand, he eaten it up. I'm not sure what that last fruit is. When it is yet in his hands means that he has plucked up that fruit. He eaten it up. I'm not sure if that phrase means really to eat. To me, it looks like it is destroyed.
Okay, I don't want to make application. Just tell me what.
Okay, so the way I'm understanding that word, eaten it up, the way it is structured, to me looks like, that fruit has been picked and it is in the hand, it is destroyed.
Brother Andrew, can you do the same?
Yeah, I would agree.
I don't want you to agree with him. You just tell us how you do the verse.
Okay, me, I would make it like this. The glorious beauty on the head of the fat valley shall fade, and the first ripe fig before the summer, which he that looks upon sees. The last part I'm not quite sure.
It's a lot harder than you think when you start having to redo the verse. Had you finished, my brother?
I think my understanding of I do or something, or a paraphrase, a revised version.
Sorry, I didn't understand what you just said. Yeah?
Do I do the historical application of that?
No, just a revised version. Tell me what that passage says in your words.
In my own words, the verse is simply verse 4, and we have a glorious beauty which is the head of a fat valley. So we have something which is seen as a glorious beauty in different based on verse 1, which is ahead. And when something is ahead, meaning is the topmost. And when you're dealing with different, then the head will be simply meaning a can't treat of someone. So
you're making loads of application. I don't want that.
It simply means that the glorious beauty of Israel, which looks like it is good or ripe before, which looks like it's ripe, it is not ripe, and when summer comes.
How do you know it's not ripe?
Because it is out of time.
But yeah, just tell me what the verse says, because it doesn't tell you it's not ripe. It just says hasty fruit.
So there's this fat valley which brings out a fruit out of season, and when somebody sees it, he sees as if it is ripe. But at the end, when he picks it to eat it, he realizes it's not ripe.
You tell me where you see that he realised it wasn't ripe. Tell me where you see that. Because you're not sticking to the rules. And the reason you're not sticking to the rules is because it's not easy to stick to the rules. Kids, remember, this is a class for teachers. I'm not saying you should carry 5 Bible versions with you. But what I am saying is you can begin to see how difficult a task it is to actually write a Bible. Remember, these people have got Hebrew, they're dealing with Hebrew, and they have to translate it into English. And all I'm asking to do, which is a much simpler task, is to get a complex English sentence and simplify it. So you're going from English to English, which is relatively easy. It's much harder to go from one language to another. So it's really difficult to be strict upon ourselves, not to make application first, just to try and understand what the verse is saying. Because as soon as you start applying things, you end up starting to break rules, and that's when you begin to make mistakes. Because you've already, as an example, like what you're saying, you've already built into this model that they're immature, and that he made some mistake, and that he wasn't happy. All of those ideas, and you get none of that from that verse. But we're bringing in preconceived ideas of what we think hasty fruit might be, and it doesn't quite say that in the verse. And as soon as you start doing that, what are you going to end up doing? You're going to end up making a mistake. And Isaiah 28 is one of our premier chapters in this movement, because verse 10 and verse 13 speak about line upon line. And the other reason why this is so important is because, and I didn't stop Brother Robert because he did it too quickly. He brought in verse 1, broke the rule straight away. But verse 1 said this is Ephraim. He didn't say Ephraim in verse 4. So we're always trying to explain things in a way that is not following the rule that I'm suggesting that we should. But in verse 1 you've got Ephraim. By the time you've got to verse 14, what are you dealing with now? Jerusalem. You can see that? So you've got Ephraim and Jerusalem. So there's many things you want to understand about this passage. One of the things you need to look for is if it starts with Ephraim and in verse 14 it's Jerusalem, what should you be looking for? The transition verse. Because if you get the transition verse wrong, you're going to misapply the passage. So there's many things to look for, and all we do is when we go to Isaiah 28 is we just go line upon line. That's Christ, Moses, Millerites, and we think that's what it means. It means a lot more than that. And it's really easy to, as I say, make mistakes, come to wrong conclusions if we don't read carefully. So what I'm going to do is, I know most of you won't have these versions because you're good people and I'm not good. So I'm going to show you what clever people, I'm not saying we're not clever, but theologians have gone to those Hebrew words and they've looked at them, and this is the conclusion that they came to, what they thought this meant. Okay? And what they've done is they've got two tasks. One of the tasks is try and go from Hebrew to English, and then the second task that they had was let's try and make this simple. Okay? And when you start making things simple, we use this word called paraphrase. Everybody understand what paraphrase means? Yeah? It means you may not be 100% accurate to the original words. And that's all I asked us to do. I asked us to paraphrase in your own words what that verse meant. So I asked you to do a revised version. So for those of you who are willing to do that, that means you must be as corrupt as all those revised version people. Now, no part of the problem is we'll say, well, they used a corrupt version, but I'm not sure how corrupt their versions really were. They're not that corrupt. They're nowhere as bad as people think they are. So hopefully you don't think I'm too liberal. Okay, so this is the Bible version. Samaria, above a fertile valley, will quickly lose its glory. It will be gobbled down. Everybody know what the word gobble is? Yeah? Eat quickly. It will be gobbled down like the first ripe fig at harvest season. Now, if you read that, when I'm reading that, I'm thinking some of that doesn't seem quite good to me. It doesn't seem to be accurate in its expression of what I'm reading in verse 4. The problem is I can't read Hebrew, so I'm just going from the King James. It doesn't sound quite true to the King James. I don't know what you think about that. I'll read it again. Samaria above a fertile valley will quickly lose its glory. It will be gobbled down like the first ripe fig at harvest season. So I'll go to another one. This one is, to me, is a little bit better. And the fading flower of its glorious beauty, which is on the head of the rich valley, will be like a first ripe fig before the summer. When someone sees it, he swallows it as soon as it is in his hand. So that seems a bit more rounded. I quite like that one. And I'll just do one more. Actually, no, let me see. Oh yeah, I like this one. That city sits on a hill with a rich valley around it, but the beautiful crown of flowers is just a dying plant. It will be like the first figs of summer. As soon as someone sees a ripe one, they pick it and eat it. Now, for me, that's a pretty accurate translation of the King James. So you read the King James, and I'm going to read this one again. And you tell me if you like this corrupt version. The city sits on a hill with a rich valley around it, but that beautiful crown of flowers is just a dying plant. It will be like the first figs of summer. As soon as someone sees a ripe one, they pick it and eat it. What do you think? Do you like that? I like that revised version. I think it's pretty accurate, and I think it explains what's going on. If you went through the imagery, verses 1 to 4, even you'd probably have to go into 5 as well. Let me back out of that. I'm going to restate that, but I want to say something else. When we read Bible verses, sometimes they don't make sense because we don't understand the imagery. So let me give you an example. When you go to Daniel 11 verse 45, he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. We know that verse. Yeah? So what is all of that talking about? When it talks about the glorious holy mountain and the seas. Someone said something? Jerusalem. So I want to say it's talking about geography. Talks about seas, talks about mountains. So what we should be doing is opening up maps and looking at the geography of that verse before we make any kind of application. So sometimes we're not, actually most of the time we're not very familiar with doing that. We're not familiar or even aware that we should be looking at geography. So I'm suggesting that the reason why we're not familiar, because it doesn't happen that often. It's only in a few instances that you have to think about geography. And so often we don't think about it. So when we come to these passages, can you see how this revised version, it said this: that city sits on a hill with a rich valley around it. Is that geography? Yeah, you can all see that's geography. So when you go to the King James, it says, and the glorious beauty which is on the head of the fat valley. Now I think you can see geography in there, but maybe you couldn't see it before. If I'd asked before, can you see geography there? I think most people wouldn't have seen it so easily. So if you went back to the geography of this place, what you would see is something that looks like this. This is a stylized version. Stylized means not just simplified, but I want to make the point, so it might not be 100% accurate to the geography. Does that make sense? But it's a fair approximation. So you've got this, and what I've drawn here are mountains or hills. So you've got these mountains, and each one of those mountains is connected together. So if I was standing here and I looked that way, so this is a plan view looking down, but now I'm looking sideways. Everybody understand what I'm going to do? So if I look sideways and I looked at that, you'd have the mountain, that's this one, then you'd have this mountain, which is this one, and they're connected together by a shallow valley, if I can call it, or what we might call a pass. Does everybody know what a pass is? A pass is like a roadway between two mountains. Everybody know that? Yeah? If you're trying to traverse through a mountainous area, you don't go over the mountains. You try and look through look at where the passes were, so you can get through this thing. So each of these mountains is connected together. So I've drawn that, and what's here is a valley. So can everybody conceptualize that? So this valley, it tells us, is a fat valley. What is a fat valley? Sorry? Fertile. A fertile valley. So you know that's why they chose this area. It's a fertile valley. So these are these hills or mountains, and as I say, they're connected together. Now if I got all of this and rotated it 90 degrees, I'm going to take this, now let me rub some stuff out. I'll rub it out here. I'm going to get this, rotate it 90 degrees, and now I've got this. What does this look like? I'll redraw it simply to give you an idea. I'm suggesting it looks like a necklace. Okay, it looks like a necklace. And this necklace, let me go back to, if I can find that version. But that beautiful crown of flowers. So, someone said that looked like a crown. So, I'm saying it's a necklace, but it's not a necklace that you put around your neck. Okay? It's like a necklace, but I'm going to call it a crown, like my brother did. And if you have everybody know what a garland is? A garland is a necklace made of flowers. If you go to a Polynesian country, you know when you come off the airplane, they greet you, and what do they put around you? They put these garlands which are made of flowers, these necklaces. They put them on. It's their tradition. So they had a tradition like this, but this is not a big one that goes around your neck. It's a smaller one that you put on your head. Okay? So if you had a beautiful woman, she'd have this garland that goes round her forehead, and it would culminate in this beautiful head flower above her forehead. It's obviously a really bad picture, but hopefully you can imagine what that looks like. It's something to beautify someone. Sorry? I didn't hear?
Looks like the woman in Revelation 17.
Okay, so it's because of my bad picture. So the imagery that's being portrayed here is based upon this imagery. It's based upon geography. They've taken geography and they've stylized it, and they call it this garland of flowers. So if you're okay with that, that's where all that imagery is coming from. So let's now look at the verse and try and make some kind of application. And the glorious beauty which is on the head of the fat valley shall be a fading flower. So the head hill or the head place would be what? Break application now. Which city? So this is Samaria. The whole thing is Ephraim, the whole area, but this is Samaria. So here's Samaria. This is the capital. It says, which is on the head of the fat valley shall be a fading flower. Now when you've got a flower that's fading, what's happened to it? In real life, what's happened to it? Scorched by the sun?
It's getting yellow, it's falling off.
It's falling.
Yeah, because what happens in the natural world when the flower is falling is like it gets yellow and then
It does what?
it gets yellow.
Gets yellow.
It fades not because it's scorched by sun. It's just because it has reached its old age.
Okay, so it could be scorched by the sun, but it could be that it's reached old age.
The petals lose their moisture.
Say?
The petals lose moisture.
They lose
Moisture.
They lose moisture.
It's been plucked from the plant.
It's been plucked from the earth, and if it was plucked from the earth, it would lose moisture, and it would then die. So, if you went to wheat as an example, once wheat comes to its maturity, what does it lose?
Its color.
It loses its green colour, and it also loses moisture. Does it fade and die? No, it just stays there, waiting for harvest. So, a flower is different. When you get a flower, and I'm not going to draw it, when it grows, once it reaches maturity, what will happen to it if you don't do anything with it? It will begin to fade. Even if it's in the ground, it will begin to fade. Even if it had all the moisture that can come out of the ground, if it had the sunshine and the rain, once it reaches maturity, a flower, a rose, any kind of flower, I don't know what flowers you have here, they will fade, they will die. So, if this is a fading flower, what is that telling you? Where have you arrived at if it's a fading flower? You've reached to maturity. Someone said? Summer. Is that what you said, summer? Or someone said summer? Okay. So you've reached a place where it's come to maturity and it's now ready to be harvested. You okay with that? But it says this is before summer. We can see that. The verse says before summer. So it's going to explain it. It's going to reconcile these two issues. In the King James it says as. As soon as you read the word as, what does as mean? Comparison. When you're comparing, it's what? Parable. This is repeat and enlarge. It's the parable, there's a comparison. So, the first one says it's a fading flower, which means it's time, it's actually past harvest. I want us to see that it's past harvest, yeah? Because it's fading. The second one says it's hasty fruit before summer. What is hasty fruit? I don't know if you want to look in the Hebrew.
Fast fruit. Fast right before others.
So if you go to, it says there's 4 words. In fact, there's 5 words. It says, and, which is supplied, as the hasty fruit. 4 words, as the hasty fruit, It took 4 English words that should do one thing from the Hebrew. And I don't know if anybody's got the Hebrew word up. It's 1061. If you go to Brown Driver Briggs, the first definition says first fruit. Are we okay with that?
Yeah,
so first fruit, and if we went to that, the other translation, they had already picked up, it says, and it will be like the first figs of summer, as someone who sees a ripe one. So these people are picking up that it's ripe, but it's the first ones that are ripe. That's what hasty means. It means the first fruits that are ripened, which we call the first fruits. So, in verse 4, the first part of it, which says it's a fading flower, what does that mean? It means it's already time to harvest this city. So Samaria is already supposed to have been harvested. So if it says it was a fading flower, what does that mean?
Won't last.
It was past harvest. So if you had asked the people, would they have said, oh, it's harvest time? They wouldn't have said that. They would have said, oh, it's not probation time, it's not time for a close of probation. There's still plenty of time to go yet. Things are not that bad. We're not ready. So it says that it's not harvest time by the looks of things, but when God looks at it, he says what? It's already past harvest. Why would God wait past harvest? Why would you wait past harvest? What would be your motivation to wait past harvest? So when you harvest something, what do you do to it? When you do with a kit, when you do with a sickle, what are you doing with the plant? You cut or you kill. So you're killing it. You're destroying the plant. You're producing death. We know that. So why would you wait for harvest? Why would you stall? What happens as soon as he's going to start cutting Samaria down? What happens to them?
I think it's because it's a hasty fruit. It has come up before it's time for harvest.
Okay, so I want to suggest that the reason why God has waited, harvest is already there. It's already harvest time because the plant is already faded. He's waited and waited in mercy. Because when he cuts Samaria down, is there any possibility that they're going to be saved or retrieved afterwards? Can they say, sorry, give us another chance? No. So once he harvests them, it's final. And this harvest is not positive, it's negative. Because they're going to be taken by the king of the north. So God has delayed and delayed past harvest, past the time when they should have been taken down. In his mercy he waited, and they don't even realize that they'd passed the time where everything is already finished. So that's the first part of the verse. What we'll do is we'll look at the second part of the verse in the next class. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we give you praise and thanks for your goodness. We ask, Lord, that you would help us to learn how to study your word, how to read. We ask that you would direct us to use all the rules and techniques that you have handed down to us through our forefathers. Be with us and bless us, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.